And of course, systems go. We have Barack Muluka as well as Martin Olo. Gentlemen, thank you so much for creating time. Though Martin Olo here says it's a bit too late.
For my visa has issues.
But at least for the nation, let's just be here and, you know, dissect some of these important matters. And I mean, it looks like we have already decided on what subject we begin with. I know there's so much that has played out over the weekend, what happened in Siaya County, you know, the utterances by the president himself as well as the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. But now, because we discussed the echoes of, Dr. says echoes of what?
Of conspiracy.
Of conspiracy, echoes of the nation, I say.
Echoes of the nation. It's the echoes of the nation.
It's the echoes of the nation. Why echoes of conspiracy, Dr.?
Well, the echoes of the nation are synonymous with conspiracy.
Okay.
It's the one thing that is consistent over the past 2-3 decades.
Right.
Conspiracy. To the extent that today we are having a broad-based conspiracy.
Okay.
And you can see the principal conspirators assembling somewhere and saying, you know, we began this conspiracy together. And if you don't come easy, Mr. Edwin Sifuna, we are going to discipline you. So that this person is basically not talking to Mr. Sifuna. He's talking to Mr. Sifuna's boss, telling the boss, discipline your young man. We are co-equals in our co-conspiracy.
But wait a minute.
To have, yes, these people should wallow in the echoes of silence. And if they think that they're going to come here and start addressing me, you and I, who are co-conspirators and who go a long way, we shall discipline them.
I will remind us of what the president says. He says that my brother, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, came through. I came through for him at some point in time, and I'm happy that he has come through for me. And all this is because we want a better nation. It's because the Right Honorable Raila Odinga wants a better nation. But now that you speak about the co-conspiracy and the fact that they began this game quite a long time ago, I want to ask this question because I see how the Right Honorable Raila Odinga carries himself and what he says in relation to, you know, just addressing the concerns of the Kenyans. But when I listen to the likes of Sifuna, and when I read some of the press statements they sent to the press, I want to ask myself, is this the Right Honorable Raila Odinga speaking behind doors through Sifuna? Because he's not kind in any way.
Echoes.
Echoes.
You know what echoes are?
All right.
It depends on where you are. So the echo keeps going and going and going. So the echoes. So we must maintain the theme.
Okay.
The echoes.
All right.
When you listen to Sifuna, when you listen to diehard ODM, including President Ruto himself, you know, he's as he said,
yes.
He's a founding member of ODM. That's true. I will not tell Barack that I'm also among the founding members of ODM.
No,
I will not tell him.
we were, you and I.
Okay. Yeah? So having said that, what you're hearing are echoes. Right. So these echoes are reverberating depending on where one is standing. Certainly, what we saw in Siaya is a reminder that this bromance or this relationship, political relationship between BAMBA and William Ruto goes back to 2005 and 6, around the Orange and eventually the founding of the Orange Democratic Party, and then the Pentagon, and then that is where that relationship taking them all the way to 2007,
right.
And then later on President Ruto takes another direction and BAMBA takes another direction. First with the Nusumukate, we see President Ruto then, or rather William Ruto then, as his cabinet secretary, minister then for agriculture, and then we know what happened, and we also know the politics of it. We are in an interesting country where we have to understand that we may be having different colors. I may be putting orange today, he's putting on blue today, but those don't define our ideological formations. We seem to be having a single-most approach to things which usually do not take on an ideological position. So it's so easy to find people who seem to be saying different things actually agreeing. Earlier on when Barack was talking about the broad-based, or what people have said, the bread-based, I mean, there is nothing that can be seen as an aberration of democracy or an aberration of this constitution, or indeed an adulteration of this constitution, as opposed to just saying that we have a broad-based government, because There's nowhere in this constitution
But-
where such a thinking has been anticipated.
Okay.
What we have is majority and minority. And again, it's not opposition and government. It's simply that we are in a system, a presidential system, where the legislature has minority and has majority. And the judiciary works for all of us,
Right.
and the executive works for all of us. So there's nothing like opposition in executive, opposition in the judiciary, opposition in the legislature. So when all is said and done, we expect that in this current Constitution 2010,
Right.
when we elect you as a president, you and your government work for all Kenyans.
Yes.
They may be the majority who supported you, but also the minority who might not have supported you have their way, their say.
And that they do not dispute, at least the members of this broad-based government. You hear the brother of the Right Honorable Raila Odinga Oburu as well saying that we're actually not in the business of taking what is another person's share or another region's share. We're in the business of taking our share. And therefore, that is an acknowledgement that, of course, I mean, under this leadership, every other Kenyan, every other region is well represented, and there is a share of them, of course, and therefore the government is committed to ensuring that this happens. So when we look at this gentleman and perhaps listen to what it is Martin Olo speaks of, you know, that it is not envisioned in the Constitution that we have a broad-based government, yet this is history repeating itself. Where do we fail Daktari in the sense of saying no to such formations, because then at the end of the day, they do not speak of what is the rule of law?
First, I think let's just shoot straight. We are talking about two gentlemen who are serial troublemakers.
Okay.
That whenever there's a crisis in this country of a violent nature, they are involved one way or the other.
Right.
And when President Ruto talks about having been there for Mr. Odinga, he needs to be taken to task to explain what he means by having been there. That when you needed a man to stand behind you, I was there. He's talking about the 2008 post-election violence.
Yeah.
And it is not anything that anyone wants to be proud of, to say that I stood for you in 2008, and that when I was in trouble with the Gen Zs, you stood for me. They're not saying that they stood for the nation. So they have these competing interests.
He goes ahead to say that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga is standing with him right now, by him right now, simply because of the interest that he has for the people of Kenya.
Which interests have been ambiguous, moved from ambiguity to vagueness, moved from vagueness to nihilism. We don't know what they are anymore, even those of us who thought at some point that we ideologically understood where President William Ruto was going. We no longer understand him,
Right.
and we must come here and say very clearly that we don't understand him from that ideological perspective. But we seem to understand him very clearly, where the philosophy of government seems to be that it is about primitive accumulation of wealth for oneself. There are things which have been stated by his detractors who have been with him in government, and we have not heard him come out to refute them,
Right.
to confute them. We have seen him move on and say, you can call me names, you can give me labels and titles, they do not matter anymore. About shares and people saying that we don't take another person's share, there's a fable which was told many centuries ago by a Greek man called Aesop.
Okay.
And he said that once there was food which was to be shared between the lion and the donkey. And the donkey was given the opportunity to do the sharing out. And the donkey thought that he would share in equal parts, 50%, 50%.
Right.
Whereupon lion pounced upon him immediately. And the same food was presented to Hare, and Hare was told, can you share it out equally? And Hare took a small bit for himself and left the rest for the lion, what is otherwise known as the lion's share. And the lion said, oh, you are so wise.
Okay.
How did you know how to share so equally? He said, I know the lion's share. So there's always something called the lion's share. When they talk about these things in those forums, you've got to know who the lion is. And the lion will talk about and against things like tribalism. I don't want to see tribalism. I don't want to see corruption.
Yes.
It's called preaching water
And taking.
and taking wine.
In your heart of hearts, you believe that that's basically what the president is doing, preaching water and taking wine. A president who is interested in running this nation, and because he understands very well that if there's no peace, then he has no nation to run. Why would he be preaching water and taking wine if we're talking about him, saying, and these are his words, we want a peaceful nation, we should not be, have negative ethnicity, we should not have a divisive, kind of approach when we're talking politics and all that.
Linda, when you listen to a politician, don't listen to what they say. Listen to what they don't say.
Okay.
No politician worth his salt or their salt would go to bed hungry for you.
Okay.
Would go to bed thinking about you. It's about themselves and how to perpetuate themselves in power. It is now the responsibility of those who are governed, those who then give power to these politicians, to hold them back. That's why there's the concept of checks and balances. Because the propensity for politicians to run away from accountability is so high.
Okay.
And that's why you give a politician power and you also tie their foot and try to pull back.
Okay.
That is the reason. So when you create a three-way government, what we are telling the legislature is hold back the executive. And what you're telling the judiciary is keep the executive in check. And what you're telling the executive is that, yes, make the law, but take it to parliament. And that allow judiciary to interpret. So when this gentleman, he was a French guy called Montesquieu, conceptualized separation of power, it was a clear admission that left on their own, any of these organs can run away.
Okay.
So separate powers so that you keep the checks and balances.
Just how separated are our powers, to be honest?
No, now that is now the problem, that in our situation, and indeed even in any of the political situations, until the other day, separation of powers was a very clear concept in America. Not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore. Because what you've seen there is that you have an executive president who is actually trying to operate like an authoritarian, like a king. So, but the essence of that constitutional democracy was to enable those three organs to work together. So we may not be having it here, but the intentions of our constitution are very clear. We may not be following it, and indeed we don't expect the politician, typical politician, to even be held back. Remember President Uhuru used to complain that he would have done things by this constitution. The same thing. President Ruto did not believe in this constitution, that's why he opposed it. Today, even as he swears to live by it, he finds this constitution holding him back to do many things.
Okay.
And to us, that is the only safeguard we have as a people, because at least there's something that's holding back these ambitious leaders of ours from running. Does that stop them from doing things that are extra-constitutional? No, they do. But that doesn't stop us from calling it out and saying that is unconstitutional.
Okay.
And perhaps that's the safeguard that we have.
All right. You heard Barack say that I am dressed in their colors. By this, I did not know whether he was referring to the colors of Butere girls, because anyway, we understand that they have a maroon somewhere.
Yes.
If at all this is. Or he was talking about his DNA party, he's the secretary
we
general.
We don't even know what the colors of his
the reason
party
why
are.
I'm actually bringing up this point is for him to actually tell us what exactly he meant. But then, when you talk about politicians that can never have the interest of the people, no matter what, is an indictment to basically what he believes in, I would want to say. Because he sat here to tell us that they're going to bring us an option of better politicians that are going to change the nation, better politicians that are committed towards the cause of making sure that the people, the citizenry, and the nation itself is in good shape. So when you say that there's no single politician we can trust, I don't know whether Barack then still has stamina to stand and face the nation and tell us that they're going to bring us something different.
I'll be here when he has presented us with candidates, and I'll be telling him, this candidate of yours here is not for our good. And that's my role. I'll wait for him when he has presented. So as a political player or as a secretary general of a party, he might succeed in giving us a breed of different people. He might. But that will not stop us from calling them to account and holding them to account.
That's true.
So basically what we're saying here is that there is, and Machiavelli was very right about it, that when you want to win the hearts of men and women, you appear to them to be having their interest in mind, when it's actually your interest that you are pursuing. Because remember, a politician has to go out of their way to spend their money to get into power.
They must have that money back.
Yeah, they have. It's not that they love you.
Are we telling the nation to as well?
First of all, Dr. Olo misquotes Niccolo Machiavelli. In the environment in which Niccolo Machiavelli operated, women did not exist.
Isn't?
Yes,
we've read,
women did not exist. In fact, in the environment in which all those people, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Montesquieu, Voltaire, Diderot, where they operated, women did not exist. Let us keep on reminding ourselves of these realities, that even in the United States of America, women just started voting in the last century. Even in the United Kingdom, women started voting only after the First World War, because of the contribution that they had made in supporting the Allied effort.
So we say they existed in silence.
They resonated in the echoes of silence. In the echoes of silence.
I hear you.
But the other thing which we must make us a very clear distinction is one between politicians and statesmen. I agree with him about the things he says of politicians. And I distance myself from that lot of people. I do not consider myself to be a politician. I consider myself to be a statesman.
That is playing the game of politics?
A statesman thinks about the next generation. The politician thinks about the next election. So I am thinking about the next generation. And as I think about the next generation, one of the thoughts foremost on my mind is that I should advise myself to refrain from offering myself as a candidate for any of the seats. I should organize that political space. I'm also what you'd call an experimental ideologist, that I believe in certain ideas about the state, the ideal state, how it should be organized, the people who should get into that space to organize it. And Plato of ancient Rome was very right about philosophers, that philosophers know how nations should be ruled, how society should be governed, but they also don't like being the ones to get there to do it. Although he also then turns around and says, but philosophers should be the kings, and the kings should be philosophers. I will be a king in my own way by making kings. A king.
The irony is that even Plato admitted that that was not happening. And Aristotle and others said, wait a minute, that was idealistic. The reality is that the riffraffs have their say, and they resonate with the people. So when you have, and there are many characters, when you have characters on the stage that seem to be promising people and telling people what they want to hear, most likely, if this philosopher were to go there and say that, you know, I'm a philosopher, I am well learned, he will flop when the other person is actually being given the mantle.
Okay.
Because the people also love one of their own.
Okay.
Most people are not philosophers. They are riffraffs, and they love a riffraff of their own. So this philosopher can only make.
You can see where the riffraffs have taken us.
Evidently where we stand. Yeah?
Until we are saying the riffraffs must go. So we must now get to the point where we give the philosopher the opportunity to craft the team. Martin, I'm a party honcho, if you want. That is the closest that I come to that class of people. And my role is to organize that space and to give suitable people from new generations.
Okay.
I'm choosing my words very carefully. And when I talk about generation, I'm thinking a lot more about a generation of ideas.
Okay.
Because you can talk about an old generation, a young generation, but you can also talk about an intersection between the two generations, which is a generation of ideas.
Great.
Such that in a country such as ours, when we talk about people we call Generation Z, Gen Z, it should be a generation from an idealistic perspective, an ideological perspective, that you are not going to be qualified purely by age, because we have seen some sellouts among the so-called Gen Zs who were born between a certain year and a certain year. Some have been merchandised. They have offered themselves to the older generations as merchandise, ready to be bought. But you also have older people chronologically or genealogically who are thinking within the same prism. When I once met recently a person who is in the Kenya Kwanza government, after they greeted me, they said, "Oh, you are Gen Z." I said, "Yes, I'm Gen Z because our thoughts fly crisply through time and space and find a meeting point." So we must find the right people to field as candidates, and to attempt to get it right, we must preclude ourselves from the competition. The thing you hear all the time is about people saying, "I'm the finest, I'm the best." If you are the best, you could also identify other people who are as good as you are, if not better, and give them the opportunity.
All right, and become
kingmaker.
A kingmaker. All right, gentlemen, you said that you were part of the people who began the ODM party. I am curious to understand why you people decided to be out of the train, and whether you see the difficulty that we get to see with some of the members of the broad-based government, especially those ones under the ODM party, you know, in terms of aligning. But allow us to pay some bills, and then we come back on that very note.
Pay bills.
Okay.
Very good.